In the spring of 1944, while the world's attention was fixed on the beaches of Normandy, another war unfolded in silence. One fought not with divisions, but with whispers, code, and shadows. Deep inside an unmarked room in Grosvenor Square, London, the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, precursor to the CIA, approved a mission so secret that even Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force would only learn of it months later. Its codename, Operation Greystone. The goal was simple on paper, impossible in practice. Send a small team of American and British operatives into Nazi-occupied France to locate and sabotage a communications hub believed to link German defenses along the Atlantic Wall. That network, stretching from Brest to Le Havre, allowed German High Command to anticipate Allied movements before they even began. To breach it meant turning the tide of the invasion before it even happened. The OSS team consisted of 5 men and 1 woman. Captain William Bill Harlow, a veteran of North Africa, Sergeant James O'Leary, a demolitions expert from Boston, Lieutenant Arthur Miles, a British radio officer on loan from the Special Operations Executive, Corporal Peter Lang, a cryptographer fluent in German, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, an intelligence analyst disguised as a Red Cross worker, and a French-Canadian operative named Luc Moreau, who served as their local guide. Their insertion date, May 18, 1944, less than 3 weeks before D-Day. They trained in Scotland under conditions so harsh that even seasoned commandos struggled. The mission brief was delivered on a single sheet of paper, then burned in front of them. Their orders were to locate, identify, and neutralize the German communications relay hidden somewhere between Limoges and Poitiers, an area thick with Wehrmacht patrols and collaborators. But in Captain Harlow's final letter to his wife, sent just before departure, he wrote something curious. There's talk of a second objective, something no one is to discuss. If we succeed, it may change the course of the war. On the night of insertion, AB-24 Liberator modified for Carpetbagger, operations took off from Harrington Airfield under a shroud of clouds. The pilot cut the engines to idle as they crossed the Loire Valley. Below, a small patch of farmland flickered with 3 coded lanterns. The signal from the French resistance that the drop zone was clear. One by one, the operatives jumped into darkness. Only 5 of the 6 made radio contact after landing. The missing man was Peter Lang, the cryptographer. His parachute was found the next morning tangled in a tree, but Lang himself had vanished without trace. The team buried the chute and moved on, assuming he'd been captured or gone aground. But in later OSS debriefs, it was noted that Lang's codebook, one of only 3 copies in Europe, was also missing. Whether he fell into enemy hands or was following that rumored second objective would remain a mystery for decades. The team made their way toward Limoges through hedgerows and villages scarred by occupation. French farmers risked execution to feed them, hiding them in barns and wine cellars when German patrols swept through. Every step carried the weight of uncertainty. One wrong move, one informant, and the mission would be lost before it began. From a diary fragment recovered years later, attributed to Sergeant O'Leary, came this line: "The hardest part isn't fear, it's not knowing who to trust." Every face could be a friend or a ghost in Gestapo service. That was the nature of covert warfare in occupied France. The line between ally and traitor blurred until no one could tell the difference. Their first objective was to contact a local resistance network led by a man known only as Renard. But Limoges in 1944 was crawling with German security forces. After an Allied bombing raid destroyed part of the rail line north of the city, the Gestapo began rounding up suspected sympathizers. Safe houses were compromised. Whole families vanished overnight. Still, the team pressed on, guided by scraps of coded notes passed through cafe waitresses and railway workers who risked everything for a cause they could barely see. As they reached the outskirts of St. Leonard-en-Oblat, the group discovered their rendezvous point, an abandoned farmhouse burned to the ground. In the ashes, they found 2 bodies, both wearing the armbands of the Maquis. There would be no meeting with Renard, only silence and the faint echo of betrayal. That night, Lieutenant Miles sent their first encrypted transmission back to London using a Type 3 Mark II suitcase radio. The message was short: team on ground, 1 missing. Resistance compromised. Proceeding to secondary objective. London's reply came hours later. A single line from OSS control. Continue as planned. No deviation. It was a strange response, one that ignored the gravity of their situation. To some, it suggested that London already knew what they would find. As dawn broke, Harlow studied the map spread across a barn table. Limoges lay just 30 miles north. Somewhere in that city, or beneath it, was the German communications relay they had been sent to destroy. But the air in the room was heavy with something unspoken. The team had begun to suspect that Operation Greystone wasn't just about sabotage. The missing man, the vague orders, the eerie insistence to continue as planned, it all pointed to a deeper secret buried within their mission. Captain Harlow closed the map, his jaw tightening. "We go at nightfall," he said quietly. "And whatever the second objective is, we'll find out soon enough." What none of them knew was that someone else was already tracking their movements. Someone had been waiting for Operation Greystone to arrive. The mission had only just begun, and already the shadows were closing in. The night of May 21st, 1944, fell heavy over the countryside of central France. Rain slicked the cobblestone streets as Captain Harlow and his surviving team approached the outskirts of Limoges, a city under the iron grip of the Gestapo. German patrols prowled every bridge and rail crossing, searching for saboteurs. The faint hum of motorcycles echoed through the valleys. For the OSS operatives of Operation Greystone, survival depended on blending into the same darkness they feared. Their contact in the local resistance was gone, and with him, the fragile lifeline that connected them to London. Limoges was a city of whispers now, and every whisper carried a price. The team took shelter in a small convent run by nuns sympathetic to the underground. There, Elizabeth Warren, posing as a Red Cross nurse, played her role with quiet conviction, tending to wounded civilians while secretly gathering intelligence. Her French was flawless, but her heart pounded each time a German officer entered the ward. By day, Harlow and Miles mapped German checkpoints and radio towers. By night, they listened for intercepted transmissions. It was O'Leary who first noticed something odd. German patrols seemed to be sweeping the countryside in patterns too deliberate to be random. Someone was feeding them information. A leak had occurred, but from where? The resistance had been gutted. Could the betrayal have come from within? Then came the first sign of trouble. A coded message arrived at midnight, smuggled in through a baker who risked his life to deliver it. It was written in the standard OSS cipher, but with an unusual variation in key alignment. Peter Lang's cipher alignment. The message read, "Do not trust London. Objective has changed. Await signal from new command." Harlow stared at it for hours. Was Lang alive? Was he captured and forced to send this warning? Or had he turned? The team debated into the night, voices low and tense beneath the candlelight. Finally, Harlow folded the note, tucked it into his breast pocket, and said only, "We proceed with the mission. Until we know more, trust no one." In her hidden journal, Elizabeth later wrote, "Even among friends, fear is the greater enemy. It eats at reason, it feeds on silence." The following days tested their endurance. German convoys rumbled along the main road, hauling radar equipment toward the coast. The team knew that finding the communications relay meant intercepting one of those shipments and tracing it back to its source. On May 25th, they staged an ambush near Saint-Junien, a narrow forest road favored by the Wehrmacht for moving supplies at night. The plan was simple: disable the lead vehicle with a satchel charge, seize any documents, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. But when the explosion came, it was followed by a storm of gunfire, too fast, too coordinated. The Germans had been expecting them. O'Leary took a bullet through the shoulder, barely escaping into the trees. Two French partisans who joined them for the ambush were killed instantly. Miles managed to send an emergency transmission to London before their radio was destroyed in the retreat. His coded message was terse: ambush failed. Suspect infiltration. One wounded. Relocating. London's reply arrived 18 hours later. Maintain operation. Reinforcements not available. Mission priority unchanged. To the weary operatives, the words felt mechanical, almost indifferent. It was as if they were being treated not as people, but as expendable assets in a much larger game. They knew, Harlow muttered that night. They knew we'd walk into it. Still, they pressed on. With O'Leary recovering in a farmhouse and Elizabeth tending to him, Harlow and Morrow followed up a lead from a captured German map. The symbol for a radio transmission center was marked near Oradour-sur-Glane, a quiet village that had so far escaped major conflict. If the map was accurate, this could be the German communications relay they sought. But when they reached Oradour's edge on May 30th, they found no sign of German equipment, only villagers going about their lives in fragile peace. It was as if the map had been planted to mislead them. Harlow began to suspect a deeper deception, perhaps orchestrated from within their own ranks. Then came a chilling development. That night, Elizabeth intercepted a brief German transmission while monitoring radio chatter. American agents identified. Orders from Berlin, neutralized before June 6th. She looked up from the headphones, face pale. "They know who we are," she whispered. "Not just our unit, our names." The silence that followed was deafening. Somewhere in occupied France, someone had betrayed Operation Greystone. Whether it was the missing Peter Lang or another hand entirely, the result was the same. They were hunted men and women. In his journal, Miles wrote, "War doesn't always reveal the enemy in uniform. Sometimes, the deadliest one wears your own insignia." As the team prepared to move again, O'Leary insisted he could travel despite his wound. "If we stay, we die," he said grimly. The group agreed. Their next move would take them deeper into the heart of enemy territory, toward the German rail depot rumored to control the flow of messages from Berlin to the Atlantic Wall. Before leaving Limoges, Harlow returned to the convent to thank the sisters for their shelter. The Mother Superior pressed a folded note into his hand. "A man came last night," she whispered. "He said to give you this." Harlow opened it under the moonlight outside. The handwriting was unmistakable, Peter Lang's. It read, "Not captured. Following secondary directive. If you proceed, you'll uncover what London buried. Trust no orders after June 1st. Harlow looked up into the night sky, the distant rumble of German engines echoing through the valley. The question that haunted every OSS operative in France now loomed before him. Who was the real enemy? The one in front of them, or the one behind? The team gathered their gear and vanished once more into the French countryside, leaving Limoges behind in smoldering silence. By the time the sun rose over the hills, Operation Greystone had become something else entirely. Something unspoken, something no one at headquarters would ever admit existed. By June 1st, 1944, the operatives of Operation Greystone were ghosts in occupied France. Their radio contact with London had gone silent, and every move now felt like a step into a trap. The team, reduced to Harlow, O'Leary, Elizabeth Warren, Arthur Miles, and Luc Moreau, was closing in on their suspected target, a German rail depot on the outskirts of Poitiers. Intelligence suggested it was more than a logistics hub. It was the nerve center relaying encrypted orders from Berlin to the Atlantic coastal defenses. The depot was heavily fortified, patrolled by soldiers from the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, which was redeploying north toward Normandy. They were brutal and efficient, and the team knew that a direct attack was suicide. Their plan was infiltration. Under forged documents and stolen Wehrmacht uniforms, Harlow and Miles would pose as German officers, while Elizabeth and O'Leary stayed outside to monitor radio traffic and time the exfiltration. The night before the operation, they sheltered in an abandoned wine cellar near Saint Benoit. The air was thick with dust and tension. Harlow spread the map on a crate, tracing their path with the edge of his knife. "We get in, we find a relay station, we pull any documents we can, and we're out by 0300, he said. "No heroics, no side missions. Whatever this secondary directive was, it dies with us." But not everyone agreed. Miles had grown increasingly uneasy since receiving Lang's note in Limoges. "Sir," he said quietly, "if Lang's alive, then London's lying to us. We can't destroy something we don't understand." Harlow's eyes hardened. "We're not here to understand, Lieutenant. We're here to finish." At 2,200 hours, wearing ill-fitting uniforms and forged passes, Harlow and Miles slipped through the perimeter fence. The faint smell of diesel mixed with the hum of generators. Inside, the depot was alive with activity. trains loaded with munitions, armored cars idling, and soldiers shouting orders in clipped German. But amid the chaos, something stood out. A small, windowless building marked Funkstellzentrale, radio center. Inside, they found what they'd been looking for, a high-powered Lorenz cipher transmitter connected directly to a landline, likely a relay point for messages from Berlin. Miles snapped photographs with his concealed camera, while Harlow rifled through a steel cabinet of documents. What he found made his pulse quicken. Among the coded dispatches was a top-secret order bearing the signature of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris of the WWII, dated April 1944, weeks before the mission began. It referenced Operation Greystone by name, describing it as a strategic deception initiative authorized by Allied command. The German intelligence network already knew the OSS mission was coming. Harlow's stomach turned. It wasn't the enemy who had been blindsided. It was them. Before he could speak, a shadow fell across the doorway. Two German officers stood there, pistols drawn. Miles reacted first, firing a silenced round that dropped one of them instantly. The other shouted, triggering the alarm. Sirens wailed. The depot erupted in chaos. Harlow grabbed the files, shouting for Miles to move. They sprinted through the maze of rail cars as floodlights flickered on, bullets sparking off steel. Outside the fence, Elizabeth heard the alarm and clutched her radio headset. "They're blown," she hissed. O'Leary and Morrow rushed to their jeep, laying down suppressing fire as the two men burst from the gate. The team escaped into the forest amid gunfire, the documents still clutched in Harlow's pack. By dawn, they were 20 miles away, hiding in a stone barn near Knoll. O'Leary's arm was bleeding again. He tore off his bandage and laughed bitterly. "So what now, Captain? We run forever." Harlow didn't answer immediately. He spread the recovered papers across the floor, scanning the German text. The messages revealed something staggering. OSS Command had authorized the operation, knowing the Germans were aware of it. The mission wasn't about sabotage at all. It was bait, a distraction designed to draw the WWII's attention away from the real Allied plans for D-Day. Lang's warning now made sense. Don't trust London. He had discovered the truth and gone rogue to avoid being silenced. But the question remained, where was he now? That afternoon, Luc Moreau slipped away to contact a resistance cell rumored to be active nearby. He never returned. Hours passed, then a full day. No word. When they searched the next morning, they found only his satchel by the roadside, his pistol still inside, and German tire tracks leading north. Two gone. For left. That night, as they huddled around a dim lantern, Elizabeth finally broke the silence. "If this was all a lie, what's the real target, Bill?" Harlow shook his head. "Maybe there never was one. Maybe we're the target." From his notebook, Miles wrote later, "The hardest thing in war is not killing a man. It's realizing the orders that sent you to die came from your own side." The following morning, they prepared to move toward the mountains near Oradour-sur-Glane, seeking new cover. Before leaving, Harlow burned half of the German documents to ash, keeping only a few key pages. "If Lang's alive, he'll know what to do with these," he said. "If not, no one will." As they disappeared into the mist, the faint thrum of distant engines echoed once more across the hills. German half-tracks, moving methodically south. Whether they were hunting the OSS team or following orders from London, no one could tell. All that was certain was this: Operation Greystone had become more than a mission. It was now a secret war, fought not between nations, but within them. And the line between ally and enemy had vanished entirely. June 4th, 1944. 2 days before the D-Day invasion that would define the century. But in the dark forests east of Oradour-sur-Glane, the men and women of Operation Greystone had no idea history was about to be made. For them, time had narrowed to survival, measured not in days or hours, but in heartbeats. Their mission was unraveling, and their trust in London was gone. The OSS team had gone to ground in the ruins of an old monastery, its stone walls cracked and ivy-covered, the kind of place the war seemed to have forgotten. From there, Lieutenant Arthur Miles worked frantically on the damaged Type 3 radio, hoping to reach London. Sparks hissed from the broken set as he tapped the key again and again, his voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "Greystone to control. Come in. Mission compromised. Need extraction coordinates. Static." Then, Faintly a response. Continue as planned. Deliver package. Harlow froze. Package, he muttered. We never had a package. Elizabeth looked up sharply. Unless they mean Lang. For a long moment, no one spoke. The implication hung heavy. Peter Lang, their missing cryptographer, wasn't just an agent gone rogue. He was the objective. The so-called sabotage mission had been a cover to locate or silence him before he could expose what Greystone really was. That night, rain fell in relentless sheets as they debated their next move. O'Leary's shoulder wound was festering. Fever blurred his thoughts, but even he knew something was wrong. They'll kill us all, he rasped. Doesn't matter who finds us first, the Krauts or our own brass. Harlow sat in silence, staring into the candle flame. He'd served under OSS Director William Donovan himself. He had believed in the mission, in the promise that the OSS fought for truth when armies couldn't. Now he wasn't so sure. Maybe Lang found something he wasn't supposed to, he said quietly. Something worth burying. At dawn, Miles finally repaired the radio long enough to intercept German communications. What he heard sent chills through the room. Unidentified Allied operatives moving toward Oradour. Orders from Berlin. Engage and eliminate. SS Panzer Division to respond immediately. They had been found. The team packed what little they could carry. Harlow ordered them to head west, toward resistance territory near Rocacourt. They moved quickly through the forest, hearing the low rumble of engines behind them. Then, as they reached the edge of a ravine, the first half-track appeared on the ridge above. Machine guns opened fire. They scattered. O'Leary returned fire with his Sten gun, cutting down 2 German soldiers before taking a round to the chest. He collapsed beside the ravine, clutching a rosary he'd carried since North Africa. Elizabeth tried to reach him, but Harlow pulled her back. We can't, he said, voice breaking. We have to go. They tumbled down the slope and vanished into the undergrowth. For hours, they ran through mud and rain until the gunfire faded into the distance. When they finally stopped, Harlow collapsed against a tree, gasping for air. Only 3 of them remained. Harlow, Elizabeth, and Miles. That evening, they took shelter in a barn outside the small hamlet of St. Victorien. Exhausted and hungry, they spread the surviving documents across the floor. Among them was one page marked Directive 12, OSS/MI 6 Joint Authorization. It contained only a single sentence. Terminate all field assets connected to Greystone upon completion of objective. Miles looked up, pale. That's us. Elizabeth stared at the paper, tears welling. They sent us to die. Harlow didn't respond. He just folded the directive and tucked it into his jacket. Then we make our own objective, he said. We find Lang. At 23:10 hours, the team set up one final transmission attempt. Miles keyed in Lang's cipher alignment, the one from the first mysterious message in Limoges, and sent out a single line. Lang, if alive, respond. We know the truth. Minutes passed. Then the radio crackled to life. A faint voice, calm, steady, unmistakably American, came through the static. Meet me at Oradour-sur-Glane, June 10th. Bring the files. After that, destroy them. Then silence. Elizabeth stared at the radio, stunned. That's him, she whispered. Lang's alive. Harlow exhaled slowly. Then we go to Oradour. But history would not wait for them. As they prepared for the rendezvous, they had no way of knowing that in 6 days' time, the village of Oradour-sur-Glane will become the site of one of the worst atrocities in occupied France, when the SS massacred more than 600 men, women, and children. And according to some witnesses, among the smoke and ruins, 3 strangers in Allied uniforms were seen briefly before the killing began, then vanished without a trace. The following morning, as Miles packed up the radio set, he noticed something strange. The final transmission had been received not from within France, but relayed through an Allied frequency, an OSS channel out of London. It wasn't Lang's voice at all. It had been sent from headquarters. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They're luring us in, he whispered. Harlow nodded grimly. Then we walk straight into it, and we find out why. With that, the last surviving members of Operation Greystone set off toward Oradour, unaware that they were marching not toward victory, but into the deepest secret of the war. Some missions end when the bullets stop. Greystones was only just beginning. June 9th, 1944. The fields of central France glowed gold beneath the evening sun. But for the survivors of Operation Greystone, beauty meant nothing now. They had crossed the line between soldier and fugitive, between fighting the enemy and being erased by their own command. Harlow, Elizabeth Warren, and Lieutenant Arthur Miles were all that remained, moving under the cover of night toward Ordre-sur-Glane, the village where Peter Lang had promised to meet them. By then, the world above them was shifting. Allied troops had stormed Normandy 3 days earlier. The beaches were secured. London was celebrating. But deep in occupied France, 3 operatives were still running a mission that no one in headquarters would acknowledge existed. Their orders were obsolete, their lives expendable. They arrived at Oradour in the early morning hours, slipping through the outskirts just as German patrols were pulling back from nearby roads. The village was peaceful, too peaceful. Farmers led oxen through the fields. Children played by the church. To Elizabeth, it felt like a strange dream. After weeks of terror and betrayal, this quiet pocket of life seemed almost untouched by war. Why here? Miles whispered. Why would Lang choose this place? Harlow studied the narrow streets, the stone cottages, the bell tower rising above it all. Maybe because no one would expect a meeting here, he said. Or maybe because someone wanted it that way. They took shelter in an abandoned mill on the riverbank. From there, Harlow reviewed the documents they'd carried since Poitiers. Among the burned edges and half-legible pages, one stood out, an OSS memo marked, "Eyes Only Donovan." It confirmed what they had long feared. Operation Greystone had been a joint deception orchestrated by the OSS and British MI6. Its purpose, to create false intelligence about Allied invasion plans and leak them to the Germans through a controlled network of compromised agents. Peter Lang had discovered this before deployment. The second objective of Greystone wasn't sabotage, it was termination. Lang and any operatives who learned the truth were to be eliminated to protect the deception. Miles lowered the paper, his hand shaking. They sacrificed us to sell a lie. Harlow nodded grimly, and we made it believable. As dusk fell, a figure approached the mill, a lone man in a worn trench coat, walking with deliberate calm. Elizabeth's heart stopped. It was Lang. He looked older, thinner, his eyes sunken with exhaustion, but unmistakably him. "You made it," he said softly. "I wasn't sure anyone would." Harlow's pistol was already raised. "Don't move. You sent us into a slaughter." Lang shook his head. "No, Bill. I tried to save you." He explained everything. Weeks earlier, he had intercepted a transmission from OSS London revealing that Greystone's real goal was to deceive German intelligence about the timing and location of the Normandy invasion. The communication relay they'd been ordered to destroy was a fabrication, an illusion meant to keep them moving, transmitting false signals the Germans could intercept. The mission was a baited hook, and the operatives themselves were the lure. When Lang confronted his superiors, he was ordered to vanish, to disappear for the good of the operation. "I went dark," he said, "but when I saw what was happening, I had to warn you. The SS has orders to wipe out this whole area tomorrow. They think you're hiding here." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "You mean the village, everyone here?" Lang nodded. "They're making an example of Oradour. You have to leave now." Harlow's jaw tightened. "And you? What are you planning to do?" Lang hesitated. "I'm going to finish it. The files, they can't reach London. If they do, this kind of operation will happen again. Greystone has to die here." Before anyone could answer, the faint rumble of engines echoed from the north. Columns of armored vehicles, SS troops from Das Reich, were approaching. Their orders were clear: eradicate the village and all within it. Harlow looked at the villagers, unaware of what was coming. Mothers baking bread, children playing in the square. He faced a choice no training could prepare him for: flee and live, or stay and try to warn them, knowing it would mean certain death. He turned to Lang. "If you're staying, I'm staying." Miles clenched his jaw. "So am I." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "Then we make it count." The rest of that day vanished into chaos. The SS surrounded the village. The men were herded into barns, the women and children into the church. Shots rang out, smoke filled the air, and by nightfall, Ordre-sur-Glane was ash and silence. Official German reports would later call it a reprisal. Historians still debate the reasons. But hidden in that tragedy is the shadow of Operation Greystone. No OSS record lists the team's final moments. But years later, French resistance archives revealed that 3 unidentified Allied agents were seen helping villagers flee before the massacre began. Their bodies were never recovered. Lang's final transmission, sent just before the radio station burned, was intercepted by British signals. Mission complete. No survivors. London classified it as enemy propaganda. The file was buried. But in the quiet ruins of Oradour, archaeologists decades later would find the remnants of a radio crystal, fused by fire, tuned precisely to the London frequency used by Operation Greystone. It remains the only physical proof they ever existed. 1952. 8 years after the war ended, France was rebuilding, and the world had moved on. Yet some ruins refused to be forgotten. The village of Oradour-sur-Glane remained untouched. Its burned-out cars, collapsed roofs, and twisted church bells preserved exactly as they were on that June day in 1944, a memorial to horror. But among the ashes, another mystery quietly waited to be uncovered. That summer, a group of French farmers clearing land near Limoges unearthed a rusted metal case buried beneath a collapsed stone wall. Inside was an OSS-issued radio transceiver, its dials frozen, its wiring fused by heat. A single sheet of paper was sealed inside a waterproof envelope beside it. The message, written in coded text, was short. Mission complete. No survivors. The discovery sparked immediate interest from French authorities and British intelligence. The Americans denied any knowledge of Operation Greystone. To this day, no official record of such a mission appears in OSS archives. But the serial number on the radio matched a batch issued to Harrington Airfield's Carpetbagger operations in May 1944, the same base from which Captain William Harlow's team had launched. Decades later, declassified OSS logs would show a gap. 3 missing entries between May 17th and June 10th, 1944. The space where Greystone should have been. The case was quietly sealed and sent to London, where it disappeared again into classified storage. Yet local historians and surviving resistance members refused to let the story die. One of them, Jean-Pierre Lenoir, spent 20 years piecing together the fragments. Intercepted radio signals, German intelligence reports, and the testimonies of villagers who claimed to have seen Allied uniforms among the smoke. In 1978, Lenoir published a small press book titled The Shadows of Greystone. In it, he quoted a survivor from Oradour. Before the fire came, a man in a torn uniform shouted to us, "Run to the woods. Tell them we were never here." He spoke English. Who that man was remains unknown. But to those who studied the case, the details pointed toward one of 3 survivors of the OSS team. Perhaps Harlow, perhaps Miles, or perhaps the missing cryptographer, Peter Lang, who had orchestrated the final deception to ensure the mission would vanish forever. What purpose did it serve? Historians believe the files Lang destroyed contained evidence that both OSS and MI6 had authorized Greystone as a false flag operation. The mission's failure gave credibility to German intelligence leaks and helped secure the secrecy of the real D-Day invasion. If so, the sacrifice of the Greystone team may have saved thousands of Allied lives, but condemned themselves to historical obscurity. Former OSS officer Colonel Edwin Wright later reflected in his private memoir, "We used men as chess pieces. Some were never meant to come home." Greystone was one of those pieces, played well, but never recovered. By the 1980s, the story faded into the realm of classified legend. A few wartime documents surfaced under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act, but the names were redacted. One page referenced a successful counterintelligence misdirection near Limoges, June 44, signed by General Donovan himself. Next to it, written in pencil, were the words, "Do not reopen." And yet, the mystery still breathes. Every year, visitors walk through the ruins of Oradour-sur-Glane in silence. The rusted bicycles, the melted church bell, the scorched sewing machines, they stand as reminders of what was lost. But few notice the small plaque near the edge of the site, added quietly in the late 1990s. To those who fought unseen, and whose names we will never know. No one ever claimed it, but some suspect the inscription was commissioned by British veterans who once served in Special Operations Executive. Today, modern researchers continue to debate what Operation Greystone truly was: a tragic mistake, a deliberate deception, or an unrecorded act of sacrifice. But one truth endures. The radio found near Limoges was tuned precisely to the frequency used by London's Secret Operations Bureau in 1944. And when tested in 1953, it produced a faint, continuous signal, a single, steady tone. No voice, no words, just the lingering echo of a transmission that refused to die. Some believe it was an equipment fault. Others call it a ghost frequency, a relic of the code that saved a continent. Whatever it was, it stands as the final whisper of those 6 men and women who stepped into occupied France, knowing they would never return. Operation Greystone never appeared in official records, but its silence spoke louder than any victory parade.